Thank you for joining us for this podcast, going over estate planning and estate planning 101. My name is Kenneth French. I'm with VastSolutionsGroup.com. Thanks for joining us on the Vast Voice production, which specifically helps entrepreneurs. What we do here at VastSolutionsGroup.com, pretty simple. We do tax, finance, and artificial intelligence to help the entrepreneur to lower their taxes, increase retirement income, and actually help with the everyday struggle that is the entrepreneur's struggle. Let's go ahead and jump right into estate planning, because a lot of our clients are now calling about estate planning. They're starting to get to the point where they're starting to worry about, I've put together my company's doing well, it's now worth whatever X is, pretty significant amount. Now we got to start worrying about estate planning. A lot of people are saying, well, I don't know anything about estate planning. I need the specifics to get going. So we're going to talk about just really estate planning 101 here. Let's go ahead and give a little specific introduction to estate planning. The term estate planning tends to conjure up images of practices that only pertains to very, very wealthy individuals. It's just not true anymore, at least. What will happen to your assets when you pass away? That's the concern. Even if the amounts of assets you own isn't impressive per se, it's still important to go through the process of planning your estate so that it passes to those you want them to pass to as efficiently as possible. If you don't plan your estate, the government will decide for you who gets what. Scary. Plus, if you do have considerable assets and don't use estate planning techniques to avoid estate taxes, then the government gets a huge chunk of it. Is that what you want? I'm going to guess no. Your estate plan might be as simple as a will that just denotes the beneficiary of a retirement account, as an example, depending on the circumstances. But usually if you're listening to this podcast or if you're working with us at VastSolutionsGroup.com, that's not the case. Our average client now, our active client, is worth $19 million. So typically, people want to make sure they're taken care of so their assets aren't really it's not a simple will. It can't be covered by just a simple will. It might be very complicated and includes several, typically trusts. We do a lot of trusts for varying purposes, plus a will potentially. So let's go over the basics of estate planning real quickly. Your estate simply describes how you wish to have your property distributed after your death. Property doesn't only mean real estate, but it means, accounts as well, meaning investment accounts. Well, let's talk about the several goals of estate planning. Number one, providing for your own needs as well as your loved ones. It also entails being prepared for the possibility that your ability to provide for someone may be compromised one day down the road. Number two, ensuring that your assets will be distributed to your loved ones as you see fit. You might want a certain asset to go to a certain person or certain groups of people. Maybe there's a charity you'd like to get part of your money depending on the circumstances. Number three, minimizing taxes. A lot of people come to us for this, specifically when it comes to estate planning, or actually for everything. But anyway, for most of us, the government is the last entity we want to receive our assets. We've worked hard. We've worked for 20, 30, 40, whatever years, and now we want to make sure the people we want to get the assets versus the government, depending on, who you think would be better entrusted with those assets. Number four, deciding guardianship for any minor children. If you have minor children, if you don't decide who gets the assets, the state is likely to make that decision for you. It might be, who knows, an ex-sister-in-law who you're not exactly a fan of. Anyway, you should like that, by the way. That little comment. Avoiding or using probate to your advantage. Probate is a process used by the courts to determine the distribution of certain assets. That's one way of getting kind of around legally the court disposing of your assets. Dying without a will, typically it's referred to as intestate. In this case, your state of residence will follow its inheritance laws for the disposition of your assets, distribution, effectively. In many cases, certain loved ones would receive nothing from your estate, at least potentially. Even worse, it's possible in some circumstance that the state would keep everything. That's frightening in some cases. Now, estate planning is particularly important if your relationship is non-traditional or there are complicating situations. Are you in, maybe your current spouse would share your assets with children from a previous relationship because it's blended, as an example, a blended family. this is one way of doing it, meaning estate planning is one way of settling that kind of before it happens. Are you living with someone but potentially not married? The person would be unlikely to receive anything under the laws of most states. Avoid unintentionally disinheriting someone that you love. You probably don't want to do that, right? So let's go over, kind of in summation, I guess, to a certain extent, some estate planning terms, because a lot of people are asking, well, what are all these terms? Because it does get a little confusing, a little scary. If we can outline some of the terms, I think that will make you feel a little bit better when talking about estate planning, when you're going to talk to your advisor or your consultant, your CPA, your insurance person, etc. A beneficiary. What's a beneficiary? It's anyone that inherits property from a grantor. There can be a single or multiple beneficiaries. Number 2, what is a grantor then? The grantor transfers his or her property to beneficiaries. Number 3, your estate is all the property that you own at the time of your death. It includes stocks, bonds, mutual funds, assets, debts, properties, intellectual property, basically any, quote, asset. Now, because I mentioned real property includes land, permanent structures, and any asset within the land itself. These additional assets would include things like oil, minerals, or mineral rights, as an example. Personal property. Well, that's basically everything else. It can include household items, automobiles, insurance policies, stocks, bonds, loans, etc., etc. What's an heir? And by the way, it's H-E-I-R. When no will has been created, an heir is someone with a legal right to inherit property. When there's a will, heirs are named in the said will. What's a trustee? A lot of people ask about that. I can understand because it's kind of a confusing term. The trustee is the party that handles the administrative aspects of executing the will and distributing the property. Sometimes the trustee is referred to as a fiduciary. Probate. What is probate? This is a legal process followed by the court system in your state to determine your heirs and distribute the property. I'm going to give a quote by Peter Drucker. Quote, long-range planning does not deal with future decisions, but with the future or present decisions. Now, these, obviously, when I talk about these, when I say estate planning, it's complex. You need someone who understands them. Typically, you start with an attorney. Typically, you'll potentially involve a financial advisor, an insurance expert, usually a CPA. Now, we employ all those either through our entity or outside affiliations, but what I would say is you don't have to use us. What I would say is you've got to start this process earlier rather than later. We had a client a while back, sadly, die, didn't have a will, and it's taken 2 years to fight through the process. Relatively high net worth individual, and it's taken years to fight through that process because he didn't have a will. Now, what I would say is, why not spend a little bit of money up front? Sometimes it could be as low as, for a trust, whatever, it can be $2,000 depending on the circumstance. True, it could be all the way to whatever, $50,000 depending on how complex it is, usually at the lower end of that estimate, by the way. But what I would say is get that process going now rather than later, especially if you're a business owner and your business is finally getting to where it is a true-to-life sum that is worth a pretty good amount of money for you. Once again, this is Kenner French talking about estate planning on behalf of VastSolutionsGroup.com and Vast Voice, produced by, once again, VastSolutionsGroup.com. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully this has been helpful. If you have any questions, go to our website, www.vastsolutionsgroup.com, or give us a call, 888-808-8278. It's once again been a pleasure. Have a great day.